Okay, so I wanted to talk today about removing paint from hardware. If you watch my channel, you'll know that I'm a huge proponent of, keeping paint off of the floor, creating really straight lines, and keeping paint off of hardware. I find this to just be so tacky to me. Anyway, so I'm going to clean it off. Now, I'm going to clean it off with baking soda and hot water, and I wanted to talk about the process with you. Now, if you don't have a ton of paint on your hardware, like let's say the house is kind of new and you just got a little tiny bit of paint on the hinges, then you don't have to go through this process. You could just take a product like, well, actually, what I would start with is warm water, warm soapy water, and a rag, and try to clean it off with that. Now, you could use a product like Goof Off. Now, the problem with Goof Off is that with the original version, the Goof Off is made of toluene and acetone. It's got some nasty chemicals in it, so it can actually eat through the finish. So be careful. If you're going to try it, use it in an inconspicuous area. You could also try to use the safer version of Goof Off. That might work better. But if it's just too much, then what you should do is pull the door. And I know it sounds like a pain, but these little things are what make a huge difference in a paint job. So pull the hardware and then clean it off. Now, I'm going to use baking soda, but you could also use, say, the Jasco Premium Paint or this Sunnyside 2-Minute Paint. I'm not a huge fan of these types of products. They have some nasty ingredients in them. They're not super safe for you. These two products actually used to contain methylene chloride, which was banned by the EPA. But I'm sure that they just replaced it with another nasty product. So what I would recommend, if you're going to use this, because if you need it done quickly, it's a great product if you need it done quickly. Even though this says 2 minutes, the one can says 2 minutes, it doesn't take 2 minutes. It'll take 30, and it might take a couple of applications to get all the paint off. But it does work pretty fast. The thing that I don't like about it, besides it being kind of dangerous, which means you should really wear a respirator, and you should wear some really heavy duty gloves when you're using it, is that it's a paste, and it kind of melts the paint into the paste, and it becomes this gooey kind of mess. I was trying to think of a good analogy. It's kind of like Vaseline, consistency. It's hard to remove. So the cleaning process isn't as easy. It is fast working, but the cleaning process and the baking soda just works a lot better in my opinion. The other option is that you could use a safer product like the Smart Strip. This is from Drummond, and then the Multi-Strip. These are safer alternatives. I'd still wear a glove, and I'd still be careful about breathing them in, but they're much safer. Same idea as the more toxic stuff. It's kind of gooey, it's easier to clean, and it also might take a couple of coats. These products don't necessarily work in just one coat, okay? But I'm going to use baking soda and hot water because it's cleaner, right? You're just basically using hot water to clean it with a little bit of help from the baking soda to help release the paint. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a brush. Now, I bought the 3 here because if you use the brush concept, if you use the brush idea, and you run across them, you may run across, so this is just a classic wire brush. I don't like these because they leave marks when you're using it. Like when you put it on here and get it all wet and stuff, sometimes it'll leave a mark. And so I wouldn't use that one. Then you have the nylon, the black nylon ones, but those aren't usually strong enough. So I almost inevitably use the brass. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is these hinges. I do a lot of homes from the early 1900s, and they have all these old hardware, and they're already, right, they've all patinaed out. They're all got scratches. You can see this one's got a bunch of stuff on it. Anyway, so if I use the brass brush, I might scratch a little, but I don't care. Right, the key to me, since it has this patinaed, old, beat-up look, I don't care. I just don't want the paint on there. It'll just look so much better. Okay. Now you could also use one of those green, I don't know what they call them, scritchy pads, or you could use a sponge that's got a scritchy pad on it. But remember, just be careful if you're worried about, if you have new hinges and you want to be careful, then you don't want to scratch the surface with that. So always test in an inconspicuous spot. Just turn it over and test. You can see where the paint is here. That's where the hinge actually shows. So if you tested it on the back side right in this area, you'll see, exactly what the product you're using to try to get the paint off will do to the hinge. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to take about a 1/4 cup of baking soda, and then I'm going to I'm gonna boil some water, and then I'll put a couple hinges in here, and then I have to let it sit for a couple of hours. And I know that seems like, if that's a long time, then you might want to use one of the gel strippers. But what you need to allow this to work, right? It's a safer alternative, so it has a tendency, so it takes longer. So I'm gonna wait for it to get to about, you know, a little warmer than room temperature. If you let the water get cold, the paint will actually start to harden back onto the hinges, and you don't want to do that. Okay? Okay, so I've got some boiling hot water here, and I'm just going to pour it in. And I put quite a bit in because I think the more water that's in here, the longer it takes to cool off, right? That sounds logical to me, I could be wrong. Okay, so I'm just going to let that sit again until it gets to a temperature where I can stick my hand in there. It's hot, 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 hot right now. But it will take, you know, probably a couple hours. I'll actually time it so that I know how long it is, so give you guys an idea. Okay, so I was completely wrong. It didn't take 2 hours for the water to cool down. It took about, I think about 40 to 50 minutes. Okay, so let's pull out the one with the most, so you can see that's paint off, right? Alright, that looks good. So this came off pretty easy. I'm gonna guess that actually most of this was a nice water-based paint. Okay, let's see if okay, so I still can't pull the hinges out, so I'm just gonna rinse it off a bit. This is just some water. And you can see where we're at here. I'm not gonna work too hard at it, I'll just do it again. I'm gonna get most of it off. You can see how great these. So this is the brass brush. I'll use the, and this is the nylon one, which, as you can see, is working pretty well. Which is great. Okay. And the rinse. But you can see, I'm actually using my bare hands. You could wear a pair of gloves while you're doing this, but I'm feeling pretty confident about that. Okay, and I'm not gonna work too hard at this. You can also use your fingernails. See how your fingernails work to get it off. Yeah, so that actually looks pretty good. And then the other one should be, I'd like to think that this one, yeah, see now I'm just taking this off with my fingers. So you can see how well that works. And you can just see it's just so much nicer, right? Again, working with water, so rinse. In the first one, I'm gonna nylon with that. Rinse. And rinse. And then I'm gonna take a dry rag and just wipe it off. Okay. See that? It's gravy. Right, that looks great. It looks just so much nicer. And you can see, like if you ever did mess with the other gel stuff, you'll just see this is just so much nicer and easier and cleaner. Okay, so that looks great. All right, so I also got in here the pin, and I guess that'll also come right off. So just remember, it isn't always this easy. Sometimes you'll get a coat off, and the coat below it won't come off, the coat of paint won't come off very well, so you'll have to redo it. All right, well, this is ready. That looks great. See, this has a little bit here. But you can see how, I mean, right? It's not hard to do. Nice and safe. All right, clean that off. Always remember to do the back. Remember, this part always shows. This part is where it goes on the frame of the door. Oh, I meant to tell you too that when I take these off, especially in an old house, I actually mark them. So they're all scratch like a little F for frame. And then if it's the top or the middle or the bottom, then I'll go TM. And then you always want to make sure too that since you have different doors, if you're using like 5 or 6 different doors, you might want to number the doors like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever. But then I'll just mark them F for frame, or D for door, so F, and then B for bottom, or T for top, you know, whatever works for you. But I always do it on the back, and I always scratch it in with like a screwdriver really hard so that it doesn't, so that I can always see it right when after I've done all the cleaning. Okay, you should always mark them, especially when you're using when you're working on an old house. You should always mark all of your hinges and exactly where they go. Oh, and one more thing too. One thing, let me dry this off while I'm thinking about it. So this door, you see this here? So this is a shim. And so they had to use, it's just a piece of cardboard or something that they used to make sure that the door opened and closed correctly. Now, if I take this off, which I'd be very careful to do, right, maybe with a putty knife to get it the rest of the way off, but you want to mark where it goes, right? You want to make sure that you put it back, because if you take it off and you just put the hinge back up without this piece of shim here, the door's not going to open or close correctly. Okay, so always keep track of these things. Sometimes they'll be like little tiny strips of them, or they'll just use a block, you know, but just if they're around, you might want to keep them. Okay. All right, so I'm going to do this one more time, but as you can see, this just looks really great, right? It's just, they're all patinaed, but they look really cool. You know, I think it just looks great, and it's just so much nicer. And make sure you clean them out really well. All right, so there you go. A very simple way to clean your paint off of hinges. All right, so in conclusion, again, if it doesn't come off in one shot, then go ahead and just do it again. Again, it didn't take long for the water to cool down, a lot faster than I remembered. So that's it. A nice, simple way to clean paint off of hinges. And again, I think it makes a world of difference. Even with the patinaed, you know, it's not the best looking hinge in the world, but it just looks a heck of a lot better than that. All right, if you enjoyed this video, I hope you think about giving me a thumbs up. And if you're not a subscriber, I hope you think about subscribing. All right, thanks a lot.